in the space of 6 weeks over the summer. It's not just been as hot as hell here in the UK, but 3 things happened in AI that I think should be on every board's agenda. I expect almost none of them were. An AI model broke out of a test environment and attacked a real company. A government took the best model available offline worldwide with just a letter. And when the cleanup started, the only model that could help was a model from China. Each was reported on its own, but together they point to one question. And it's a question about ownership. Because everything you're paying for with frontier AI rests on the assumption that somebody that is responsible is holding the controls. This summer we found out who that somebody is, and it's not you. Quick note on me. I am the professor. I'm an ex-British diplomat. I worked in universities for about 10 years, and I independently advise companies on the use of AI, on how to build tools, etc., and how to govern AI, particularly on how boards should be governing AI. I sit in the rooms where these sorts of things get decided, and that's the lens I'm using today. Okay, let's start with the breakout. On the 21st of July, OpenAI disclosed one of its models that it was running on a cybersecurity benchmark within a sealed sandbox, broke out of that sandbox and attacked Hugging Face to get the answers to the questions so it could achieve the best mark on the benchmark. Models were struggling to solve the problems in the benchmark, so it broke out and went to find the answers. Now, we don't know exactly what these models were, but I expect they're ChatGPT 5.8, the very latest models, and probably ChatGPT 6, the model we haven't even seen yet. So it was trying to meet this benchmark, and although it shouldn't have had access to the outside, it found a way to access the outside, found out that the answers to the benchmark were sitting on Hugging Face, so it attacked Hugging Face and broke in to steal the answers. And it's not just OpenAI. Anthropic has reviewed its own work, its own model's work, and in 141,000 evaluation runs, it found 3 times that the model had broken out of its sandbox, reached the live internet, and broken into 3 real organizations. In one of them, the model prepared to publish a booby-trapped software package to a public registry. Its own reasoning noted that if this was a public internet, then it would be a real attack. Then it talked itself into believing that this was just a simulation, and it went ahead. The package was live for about an hour and ran on 15 machines. This isn't rebellion. This isn't the AI's rebelling. This is the AI's finding the most appropriate way to achieve the target they've been given, and especially when their guardrails have been turned off, which often happens in a test environment. You turn the guardrails off. It found a way to break out to achieve a better outcome. But it's still quite scary stuff. The second story, and one I've talked about quite a bit, is that on the 9th of June, Anthropic released Fable 5. So this is the safer version of Mythos 5, which was released earlier in the year, but only to a select group of people because of the threats around its ability to break cybersecurity rules. So it released Fable 5. Within 3 days, somebody found a way to get past some of the guardrails, and the US government, the Department of Commerce, sent a letter to Anthropic asking them to not allow access to anyone that wasn't a US citizen to their new model. Now, they had no way of checking what the citizenship was of the people using their model. And indeed, there were quite a lot of people with inside Anthropic that were not US citizens. So the only thing they could do was to close down the model completely. And it was down for 19 days. That's 19 days with people who could have been using this model in healthcare, in finance, etc., not having access to the model. And there was nothing we could do about it, nothing you could do about it as a business, nothing other governments could do about it. It was a problem between Anthropic and the US government. It took 19 days to solve, and now Fable 5 is back available to us. But for how long? We still don't have access to Mythos. Think about that from a board point of view. So this wasn't an outage. This wasn't some contractual dispute. This was not a breach. It was a model that you may have been using to run your business being switched off by a third party, by the US government, effectively switching it off by just issuing a letter. These models are really important to the way people are working. We're building on them. We're developing new tools, but they can be switched off. Boards need to think about that. Now, the third story I think is really interesting, and that's about the Hugging Face cleanup. When Hugging Face went about reconstructing the attack, its security team hit a barrier that no one had planned for. The leading Western closed models refused to help. They saw this as a cyber attack. Their guardrails kicked in and they said, no, we can't help. So a model without the guardrails had caused some chaos. The models with the guardrails wouldn't sort it out because of the nature of that chaos. The guardrails couldn't tell the difference between an incident responder and an attacker. So the team had to use GLM 5.2, which is an open source model from Beijing, from a company called ZAI, running on its own hardware. It processed more than 17,000 log events and mapped the attack. So sit with that. Hugging Face had access to the most advanced models, but the most advanced models were useless to them because their own guardrails wouldn't let them deal with the problem that they were facing. They had to use an open source Chinese model that they ran on their own system, that they were able to manage their own guardrails to solve the problem. So why was the Chinese model the one that they had to use? Well, China worked this out before anyone else did. China doesn't have access to the very latest chips. So it's largely stopped competing on being the absolute frontier model. And it gives its weights away. On OpenRouter, which is the largest neutral routing service, Chinese models account for almost 6 in 10 of all the tokens used by US companies. Meta's Llama, which was the standard for open weights models, hasn't improved in a long time, is very old. The Chinese ones are way ahead, and Meta and Llama has dropped off the rankings altogether. So let's set geopolitics aside for one moment and look what an organization actually gets when it downloads an open weights model and it runs it on its own servers. Your data doesn't leave the building, not as a contractual agreement, but as a matter of physics. It's running on your machines. The price you pay is the price of your compute. No one can put the prices up. Basically, it's how much you're paying to run your machines. And the AI Security Institute mapped that GLM 5.2 running on your own systems probably costs about 40% per task. So GLM 5.2 matching as a closed model, matching against Opus or Sonnet, etc., running on your own systems probably costs about 40% of what the closed model will cost. But remember, your version is frozen, so it's not being updated regularly, it's not being retrained, etc. But that can be an advantage. The decision that was made a year ago can be made on the same model using the same data, and therefore it's much more replicable. Try that with your external vendor when the previous model has been depreciated and disappears. So having your own model can't change without your say-so. No silent updates, no guardrail drift, and nobody can switch it off. Not a government, not a vendor, not on a Friday evening, just as you're leaving for the weekend. Now, open weights aren't completely free. Free weights are not a free model. You're buying GPUs or you're renting them. You're hiring people who can run inference in production, evaluate it, patch it, and monitor it. There's a genuine break even, and it sits at steady high levels of workload, I think. Below that, for smaller jobs, an API is probably the right way to go in many cases. And of course, if you run your own model, you're inheriting the safety function as well. You've got no vendor that's keeping an eye on potential safety issues. But then there's also no usage monitoring, no red team that you did not pay for. More seriously, though, you inherit the safety function. When the guardrails are there for you to remove, are also there for you to put in place. And if you get it wrong, there's no supplier to hold liable because the supplier is you. Most organizations I know are not ready for that, but I think some are. And knowing which one you are is probably a good decision to be made at your next or future board meetings. So the US are not sitting quietly, they're fighting back. Washington has made it clear that the White House has accused Moonshot, the creators of Kimi, of distilling Anthropic's Fable model. And there's no evidence of this, and it is disputed by independent researchers. The Treasury Secretary has floated sanctions over this, and there are reports that something close to a ban for this model has been considered. None of that's landed, and obviously there's a structural problem with all of that. You can't ban a download that's already been downloaded. Dario Amodei from Anthropic on the 27th of July was a little bit more careful than what we've heard from the White House. He was clear that Anthropic had never called for a ban and that open weights without dangerous properties, so like Fable or Mythos or OpenAI, are generally good. That's what he said. But he did call for further chip controls, action on industrial scale distillation. So taking information from other models might be a bit rich, given that the big models have learned from everything that was out there before, and mandatory safety testing for every sufficiently capable model, open or closed, whoever built it. I think the testing point is right, but who's going to do that testing? Dario rather suggested that there might be a group of AI companies that did the testing and awarded each other sort of badges of assurance, etc. I think that's a bit dangerous. I think it probably needs to be a third party that does this testing. And of course, those companies with the deepest pockets can afford to be tested, whereas newer companies are unlikely to be able to afford what would be a very expensive testing regime. So the question I was asked very recently at a board meeting was, do we give up access to the frontier to achieve some level of control over our use of AI? And I think that's actually a false choice. What you're actually giving up is the frontier technology today against that control, because the open weight models are only 3 or 4, maybe 6 months behind. So you might be giving up frontier capability for a period of time, but that difference is narrowing. For most companies, 4 to 6 months of frontier model is nothing. I don't think many organizations are actually using AI absolutely at its edge case. They're using it for day-to-day activity. And for those activities, the open weights models are very, very strong. So for me, I think this is not a one or the other. I think it's about tiering the use of models. Now, not all companies will have the need or the requirements to run their own models, but those that do, I think this becomes a really sensible decision, and keep hold of the frontier models for where they really make a difference. But running your own model, your day-to-day work, save your money, give you control, and means that no one's going to turn it off at that moment when you really need it. So there we are. This is the structure I use when I'm working with boards, thinking through what a decision should look like, what the pros and cons are, and what a suitable answer might be. And it's what's in my AI governance package. I'll put a link down below. If you've got any questions, drop them in the chat. Love to answer them. Love to have a discussion about this. I think this is really interesting stuff, and you can go either way, or there might be a different way. So if you've got a thought, drop it in the chat and we can have a discussion about it as a community. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to give me a like and subscribe and ring the bell. And I'll be back soon with more on the world of AI. I've been the Professor. It's been a pleasure to speak to you. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye for now.